Hey guys, my name is Ryan. This video is going to walk you through the entire process of flipping a house. I've been in real estate now, flipping properties for about 10 years. I've done over 100 flips in that time. My first job out of college was a waiter. From there, obviously not my passion. I wanted to get into real estate, so I started working for a contractor actually and learned the construction side of the business first. I found the right mentor that introduced me into real estate. Then I got my real estate license. And then from there, I found my first flip on the MLS with the help of a mentor and an investor, of course, that helped fund the deal. And did one flip at a time and grew very slowly in the beginning. So I went from one flip to two flips to five and built up from there. So I'm going to show you the process on how to flip your first house. All right, so the first step in flipping a property is to find a deal. There's lots of places you can find deals, wholesalers, other real estate agents, searching on the MLS and finding deals for you. Yeah, going directly to sellers yourself and spending money, doing marketing, basically becoming the wholesaler for yourself. For this example, I'm going to use the MLS because that's how I started. I did my first 50 or 60 flips all off of MLS deals. And my process was basically each day I would open up the MLS. I have a set of keywords that would crawl the MLS to find fixers. I would get a list of 4 or 5 properties for the day. I would go out and look at those properties to analyze them, and then I would write the offers at night and see what stuck. At the end of each week, I'd have written about 20, 25 offers, and I would hope one of them gets accepted. That's kind of the process with finding properties on the MLS, especially back then. There was a lot more competition. There still is now, but the key to looking on the MLS is to find the properties that are in really bad condition. The worst of the worst on the MLS is key because it weeds out a lot of the other investors. The real key is that it takes out the owner-user of the property out of the question because they're usually using a loan, and if that property can't qualify for a traditional mortgage because of the condition, then those people are out right away. So I'm looking for properties that cannot qualify for a mortgage because I'm using either cash or hard money. Those type of lenders don't care really about the condition of the property. They're more looking at the numbers. And if I've done my numbers correctly, then they will fund that deal regardless of the condition. So that's really the key to finding properties on the MLS, in my opinion. There's lots of ways to do it, but finding the properties that need a lot of work really was my key to success on finding properties on the MLS. I have an example here of a property. This is in Moreno Valley. I've already gone through the process of searching the MLS, and my search produced this property. And again, looking at the keywords, it's got every single one in here. I did a lot of probates. This is a probate. Yeah, cash only, major fixer, no blind offers, warning. Every single word that you could crawl the MLS and use as a keyword is in this description. So this property would come up on anyone's search. You can also use Zillow and other things to use keywords in search, so we can go into that later. But this is the property that I selected for the video. You can see the windows are boarded up. Again, you're looking at for the worst of the worst. This would be the first picture you see on the MLS when you're searching through properties, and it looks terrible. I mean, like I said, the windows are boarded up. As soon as you start looking at the pictures, there's mold, the ceiling's falling in. I mean, this is the type of property that scares everyone else away. I mean, look at that bathroom. There's black mold. This thing needs to be completely demolished to the studs and, rebuilt. I'm guessing the plumbing needs to be redone. I actually looked at the roof. The roof actually looks like they replaced it. So at some point, probably the roof was leaking, which caused all of these issues. And the seller at least replaced the roof. So we know that's one expense that we don't have to incur, but it looks like pretty much everything else needs to be done. Again, there's a lot of damage to this property, a lot of moisture damage. So most likely, this is the type of property that you're gonna be ripping all the drywall, tearing it down to the studs for the most part, and starting fresh. And we can account for all that in our numbers, so it doesn't really scare me away. I have, construction experience, and this shouldn't scare you away. You need to have a good contractor and someone that you work with that, has seen properties like this and can handle this type of remodel. So we're gonna use this as our example. Again, this is in Moreno Valley, so the first step, obviously, is identifying the property and now finding out what the value of this property is. So I'm using the MLS again. If you don't have a real estate license, you need to have a investors-friendly realtor that can, run these comps for you and kind of spit you out a value so you know what to work off of. And to me, an investor-friendly realtor is someone that that may work with investors already. Maybe they flipped their own house or two, and they have a good understanding of how to comp properties. And the way I comp properties is the same way an appraiser comes up with the value for a property, and that's the way everyone should be doing it. A comp is within a mile, within the same city, similar bed, bath, square footage, lot size, year built. All those things need to be similar. You can't use a 2,000 square foot property to comp, a 1,500 square foot property. The rule there is usually about plus or minus 10% on the square footage. So I've made a circle around this property of about a mile, and we're going to use that as our search area. So this is a 4-bed, 2-bathroom house, the subject property. It's 1,272 square feet. So we're going to go and kind of filter by about 1,500 square feet or less. And we're going to hit results. And then we're going to sort this from high to low, because we are, at the end of the day, looking for a fixed up property. So one that has sold at the higher end of the range in the neighborhood is usually what we're looking for. I'm looking for another flip, honestly, to base my numbers off of. Someone that has already come in and set the value for me. And this market is different than it has been, obviously, the last few years. We're going into, a recession, a little bit of a correction in the market. So I'm going to be a lot more conservative when picking my comps. I want them to be a lot more recent. So I don't want to pick a comp from even 6 months ago. It's back when the market was still strong. I want to find a comp that ideally that has closed in the last 30 or 60 days or even less. So ideally something that had closed like yesterday would be the best case scenario, but a lot of times that data is just not there. So we're gonna have to adjust our numbers a little bit just because of the market. If this wasn't happening with interest rates, then we would be doing it the normal way, but we have to adjust a little bit. So I'm seeing this property. So this is a remodel property. It's fixed up, very nice, very similar to our subject property. Same lot size, very similar square footage. This actually has one less bedroom, but a bedroom is only worth about 10 to 15 grand on the value. And again, trying to be conservative, I wouldn't really give that value to this property. And this closed in August. It actually sold $20,000 over asking. So let's see if we have another one. So again, here's another very similar property, similar square footage. And this one is not as fixed up. This is not a flip, not remodeled. This one sold for $502. This one closed back in August as well. So still, even compared to now, we're in December. That was 4 months ago. The market was hotter back then. It was starting to cool down, but still a better market than it is today. So I'm gonna be pretty conservative on my value. What I have been doing to adjust in this market is taking off about 5 to 10% of the ARV that I'm finding from the highs of the market to adjust, because we're gonna be buying this property. Once we open escrow, there's going to be a 30-day escrow. Then we're going to do a 2 to 3 month remodel, and then it's going to sit on the market for another 30, 60 days. So we're looking at a 3 to 4, 5 month process, especially with this scope of rehab. The rehab is going to take a little bit longer. So you have to look out 5, 6 months sometimes, and think about where the market's going to be at that point. So taking this like 520 value, I might take, if I took 5% off, I don't think it would be enough. So I might take 10% off. So we identified our property. We've pretty much figured out what our after repair value is. We're going to adjust a little bit just because of the market. And then from there, I'm going to use my deal calculator to use it as a tool to really quickly come up with the numbers on this property. So estimated ARV, so we had 520. If I took 10% off, that would take 50 grand off the property value. So we're going to say the value of this property is 470. Again, we need to be conservative in this market, because it very well may be worth 470 when we list this property. If it's still worth 500, then great. We added 30 grand to our profit and we look like a genius when we went and sold this property. But if it goes down like we think it's going to go down, this property very well may be worth in that 470 range in 6 months from now. So that's the value we're going to use. Square footage, I believe was right around 1,300. So I'm going to use 1,300 here. This is a very, very distressed property. Even with my deal calculator here, I don't think it's going to estimate enough rehab. So it's going to say the rehab's about 100,000. I think that's close. I really honestly think it's going to be a little bit more than that. And this is just based on experience. You're not going to really know until you do it, or you have a contractor go to the property and get an accurate rehab estimate. But in my opinion, I think 110 should be sufficient. So this is spitting out a number for you. I'm gonna adjust some of this stuff for my situation. And now the target offer price it's spitting out is $250,000. So on the MLS, every once in a while you find a deal that is priced really low, and this is priced low for a reason, but they priced it at $220. So we could actually come in at $250 on this property. It's $30,000 over asking. There's still gonna be investors going for this property. Just because it looks this bad doesn't mean that's gonna scare everyone off. So there is still gonna be some competition. I can't just come in and offer less than asking, but an offer of $250 on this property would be about right. And I would hope to, land somewhere in there. And if not, you move on to the next property. And that's the really important thing, is you have to be disciplined. If they come to you with a counter of $275, and then you start thinking about, oh, well, I took, 50 grand off the ARV, I could probably make that work. That's where, you can make a mistake, and in this market, you just can't afford to do that, especially for your first deal. So $250 is what I'd offer on this property, and that kind of concludes on how to find a property and how to analyze the numbers. To arguably one of the most important parts. Finding the deal is one part of it, negotiating the right price is a really big part of it, and now funding. Funding is obviously, some people say you need to find the money first before you go find the deal. I start with the deal first and find the funding later. Funding is an easier part, but it's still very, very important. And cost of capital is an important part of the equation on figuring out your numbers. I use hard money primarily. I used to use cash, but I scaled my business a lot more once I started using hard money. Using cash and using different private money investors, you are limited when you're paying 100% cash for a property. Once you start utilizing hard money, I started only putting it down 10% of the purchase price. My money goes a lot further that way. So instead of buying one property, I can now buy 10 with the same amount of money. So Kiavi is who I use. They used to be called Lending Home. They changed their name to Kiavi. They are pretty much the biggest hard money lender in the game, and I found them to be very, very easy to work with. Surprisingly, usually with bigger companies, they become a little bit harder to work with, a little bit more red tape, more regulations. But Kiavi has a really streamlined process for funding your deals. You start with a portal. You need to get approved with them as an investor, of course. But this is what it looks like once you get onto their site. So I use Kiavi for my hard money lending, and this is what the portal looks like. We're gonna jump into it. I'm using a bridge or bridge loan. Again, that's where we're starting there. This is gonna take some of the basic property information and kind of spit out, the numbers for the deal. This is the deal that we were looking at. So this is the great thing with Kiavi is I haven't seen another hard money lender that has this good of an online portal. So single family, this has my FICO score in it and stuff like that. Purchase price, we are going to be offering $250 for this property. We are going to rehab the property. We're going to put $110,000 into the property, and we do want rehab funds. I can explain what that means in a second. We're going to say the value of this property is $475,000. There we go. So we're pushing our purchase loan amount up to $225,000. So that is 10% down. That's 90% of our purchase price is $225,000, and they will lend rehab costs as well. So you only need to put that 10% down. The rehab costs are done as what's called a draw. You have to have some cash reserves to start the rehab process, but the way the draw works is they basically reimburse you for work that's been completed at the property. So usually I start the rehab, I get to a checkpoint, like I get all the drywall done, let's say, and then I can pull my rehab funds for what has been completed. And I do a couple checkpoints depending on how much cash reserves you have. You can do more draws if you need to. Sometimes I only do one big draw at the end. I have enough cash to fund the rehab on my own, and I'll do the draw at the end of the rehab, get my $110,000 back, and use that to go buy another property. Sometimes I don't even use the rehab draws. I always like to have them there because it's cheap money and it's available to you. If you don't need it, great. If you do need it, it's nice to have because you can go utilize that cash and buy another property or two. With 110 grand, I could buy a few properties actually in this price point. So it spits out everything you need to know here. If you want to do a 12-month term, which is the most, is average, that's telling me my rate is going to be 8.95%. It's telling me my monthly payment, and it's telling me that this deal has basically been underwritten by their system. Of course, they're going to do what's called a desktop appraisal and make sure that my after repair value is correct. But if all that checks out, this is my loan and what it looks like, and I know my monthly payment, and then it can calculate how long the rehab cost is going to take. Usually with hard money, you're going to be paying a point or 2 points or sometimes 3 points, especially if you're brand new. The amount of points you pay is going to go up. And points are basically they're just percentage points of the loan amount. So on a $200,000 loan amount, 1 point is $2,000, 2 points is $4,000. So it doesn't change your numbers that much. So I wouldn't be afraid of how many points you're being charged, even if it's 3 points. I pay 1 point, and sometimes I can get it down to a half a point, but that's just based on experience. So once you do more and more flips, you're going to get better and better cost of capital. But when you're first starting, that's why it's really important to do your numbers correctly, because your cost of capital is going to be a little bit higher. This is how I fund 95% of my deals is through hard money. I use a combination of my own cash and sometimes private money too, but hard money is the best tool to grow your flipping business. All right, so we've talked about finding the deal. We've talked about funding the deal. We skipped one part of the process, which is escrow and close. Self-explanatory. You're going to open escrow on the property. Everyone's going to work together. You're going to have title, escrow, your lender, your agent, if you have an agent involved, all work together and get to the closing table. So you're going to bring in your closing funds. That's your 10% down on your hard money plus closing costs. My average closing costs with the down payment are around 15%. There's usually an extra 5% for all the other fees, all the other closing costs, title, escrow, taxes, all the other stuff that's grouped in there. So you need about 15%. It's 10% down payment. That's what you hear, but it's really 15% with the closing cost. So you wire that money into escrow, everything closes, then you got yourself a property. If you were using that property as the example, you have a big project ahead of you. Your contractor is another one of the biggest parts to becoming successful in flipping. And maybe it's multiple contractors depending on how big you want to get and how many flips you want to do. But contractors are golden, and you have to find a good one. You have to find one that's going to give you a fair price and do a good job too. There's always a balance there too with price and quality. You don't want to get the best contractor out there that's going to charge you $200,000 for a rehab that should cost $150,000. So you have to play that balance game. You're not going to get the best contractor in the business, but you got to get someone that provides a good quality product and that knows what he's doing. And you have to know a little bit too, or at least learn it along the way, so that you're providing a good product to the end buyer as well. I've always prided myself on kind of extinguishing the negativity that is thrown on flippers, that they cut corners and flipped properties. You don't want to buy them because you're going to have a lot of problems and stuff like that. I try to do everything I need to do to make the property a good property that's going to last for a while and that the end user is not going to have a bunch of problems with. So if the plumbing needs to be redone, we redo the plumbing. We don't, repair it or try to cover it up and just pass it. We repipe the house. And same thing with, electric. If the electric system of the house is shot, or if it's really old, if it's knob and tube, then we rewire the house. Same with the roof. All the major systems of the property are the big costly items. The cosmetics are the cheap stuff even for end users. So that's why it's important to look at the property, have it inspected by your contractor, and make sure you're not missing any of those big ticket items, because that could blow your budget at the end of the day if you don't account for them. So again, with that property that was in the example, we're accounting, we know the roof's okay. We're accounting for, drywall on the entire interior of the property. We have to demo into the studs. Once you demo a house to the studs, you're probably going to uncover a lot of issues. Could uncover termite damage to the house, plumbing issues, electrical issues. You're really exposing the entire system of the house. And if you find an issue, you have to fix it, because if you cover it up and it becomes a problem for the buyer down the line, you could, get sued, and that's not what you want. So make sure you account for all this stuff in your budget. Is super important, because when an issue comes up, you want to have money in the budget to fix it the right way. So this is a property that was flipped last year, and I usually change my design maybe once a year on materials. So my contractor, basically, I hand him the keys in the very beginning. We walk through it, do an initial walkthrough. We go over the scope of work. You should have already come up with a budget before you closed escrow and did your due diligence period when you're in escrow. So you have at least some of a game plan. Now you're walking through in real time and coming up with a game plan. So it goes down to, are we reconfiguring bathrooms? Are we opening walls up? That's kind of the first step in this. So walking through the house with the contractor is the first step, and this is, where I hand him the keys, and I hope that At the end of the day, he hands me the keys back and the remodel's done. It's not always like that, but if you work with a good contractor, it should be like that. And you know, he should just be asking you, okay, what flooring do you want? You come up with the design for the flooring, the paint colors, the tile that's being used in the bathrooms. Once you have your game plan with him on the layout, you know, he takes it and runs with it. I usually check out my projects once a week. Could do more, could do less, depending on the skill of your contractor. Going through these pictures on this property, this was a higher end deal. This property ended up selling for 1.25 million. So, you know, there's a little bit higher end products being used here, but the majority of it is the same as any of my other flips. You know, I try to keep the same quality across the board, whether it's a $300,000 house or if it's $1 million house. The quality is pretty much the same. I may, you know, change the materials a little bit, which you'll see through some of these pictures. But this is the same flooring that I would put in a $300,000 house that's in this $1 million house. So I use high quality flooring still, even on the cheap houses. Paint colors are always the same. You know, we always add recessed lights. The kitchen cabinets are always the same. I use the same quality kitchen cabinets from 300 to $1 million. They're good quality cabinets, so there's no difference there. Yeah, you know, the color scheme, all that stuff is pretty much consistent through all of my flips. This one we did a full appliance package. I don't always do that. I wouldn't normally provide a refrigerator, but for this area and this property, I did. So again, your contractor really should just be asking you know, about the design. What color cabinets do you want? What tiles do you want in the bathrooms? That's the only things you should really have to provide for him. And I wouldn't let your contractor pick that stuff on his own, because you don't know what you're going to end up with at the end of the day. So this is a good example, you know, what the finished product looks like. We're going to go into that in the next video too, of how to get your property ready for listing and selling the property. But this is staged, obviously, again, a little higher end design, but it's a flip property, so that's what people are going to pay you the big bucks for at the end of the day. You're usually going to sell your flip properties for a premium, and you know, the quality has to be there. Once your contractor goes through this process, you know, like I said, you want to hopefully, the ideal situation is you hand him the keys in the beginning, you give him a design and a game plan, and he hands you the keys with the finished product. That's the type of contractor I like to work with, and you should find one that does that for you and gives you a property that looks like this at the end of the day. Okay, so once your contractor finishes the rehab and gives you the finished product, there's some important steps to take from there. I think professional photos are mandatory. It does not cost that much for professional photos. I pay anywhere between 150 to 250 bucks to do a professional photo package on a property. And I also believe in staging. I don't stage every single property, but I stage most of them. Again, that's just kind of the cost of doing business. You should build it into your numbers. Staging costs are anywhere between $1,500 and $2,500 per property, and you get a really, really nice product at the end of the day. So those are a couple steps that have to be taken at the end to really make your flip stand out. You know, staging is key too, because you need to have the buyer walk into the property and feel like it's a home rather than just an empty blank slate. Buyers have no imagination, and when they walk into a blank space, they don't know where their couch is going to go, where their bed is going to go. You know, you want to put that stuff there so they can see what the home is going to look like, and get them that homey feel that they're living in that property. So this property was staged, of course. Professional photos look very, very nice. Yeah, those two things at the end could really kill your deal. You could do a really, really nice remodel and take pictures on your phone, and it's going to look terrible on the MLS, and you're not going to get people walking through the door. The first place a buyer is going to see the property is going to be online. Most likely, most buyers are looking on Zillow first. So the pictures are what's going to stand out to them, and that's what's going to make them call their real estate agent and be like, I need to see this house. So you see this property looks beautiful, has everything you would want in a house. Of course, it's a flip, so it's going to be remodeled. So you need to put the bells and whistles on it with the staging and the professional photos. So from there, I mean, listing and marketing is pretty self-explanatory. I think the most important parts are those two things, the photos and the staging. From there, your listing agent just needs to market the property correctly, and really what that means is doing open houses. Open houses still work, and pricing it properly, of course. Hopefully, once we analyze the numbers, and you know, the numbers are the same when we list the property. Sometimes the value might be a little bit higher, sometimes it might be a little bit lower, but hopefully you're right in the ballpark of what we analyzed, you know, months ago when we first bought the property. I like pricing my properties a little bit under the highest comp. So again, I pretty much do that process all over again of analyzing the deal once I'm ready to list the property, and do that same thing again, find a comp that has sold in the last 30, 60 days, because those comps we used when we first bought the property are not going to be the same comps now that the appraiser is going to use when he's looking at your property. So you have to kind of reevaluate the numbers and see what you're going to list the property for. Price it just under the last, highest comp that was out there. That's going to get people in the door and hopefully get you an offer over asking that you can move forward with. That's kind of the whole picture now of flipping a property. We've found and identified the property on the MLS. We went through how to fund the deal. Of course, we analyzed the numbers. We went through the rehab costs, and now we've gone through listing and marketing. So kind of wraps up a quick overview on how to flip a property.